Representative Mike Johnson.
Thank you for being here. Thanks for the testimony. Thanks all of you. Delighted to celebrate Pro-Life Day at the capital of the most pro-life state in America. Hopefully we can keep it that way. Quick question on the legal front, since you're an attorney as well. The Hyde Amendment has been part of federal law for decades, right?
Yes.
And it's never been struck down by any court as imposing an undue burden on a woman's right to choose, right?
No, the courts, including the Supreme Court, have said that a state has an interest in promoting childbirth over abortion, that that's something they're allowed to do.
So I just wanted to be noted for the record, there's no constitutional impediment or legal problem with what's being proposed in this bill, so far as we know, right?
We don't believe so, no.
So it should be upheld if it's ever challenged in court because, again, we're merely cutting off the funding for the abortion procedure, and there's no intent in this bill, at least, to impose an undue burden on a woman's right to choose abortion, right?
Not at all. There's already no funding that's allowed for the abortion procedure, so this cutting off fundings for other issues would not affect that.
It's good to know that we're passing legislation that should be upheld and pass court muster. Just want to point that out for the record in case it's needed for litigation later. Thanks.
Thank you.
We have Representative Mike Johnson for a question.
Representative, go ahead.
Well, Ms. Babcock, when you were testifying, something struck me. You were talking about the onerous, burden of raising a child for 18 years, but you are aware we have adoption services in Louisiana, right?
I'm delighted we have adoption services in Louisiana.
And why is that not a viable option for someone who's concerned about the draconian cost of raising a child for 18 years?
I would imagine that it is a viable option, but being pregnant for the 9 months is in itself a risk to the mother.
Well, a lot of people have asked me over the years. I spent much of my career doing constitutional law, religious liberty defense, but also the defense of the sanctity of human life in the courts around the country, and I've defended a lot of Louisiana's pro-life laws in court when they've been challenged. People say, why are you motivated to do that? It's personal for me as it is for Representative Cox. I mean, I was the product of an unplanned pregnancy and born to teen parents. Mm-hmm. And I'm really, really grateful that my parents didn't listen to a lot of people who were trying to convince them to abort me, you know. So you say you want to protect women. About half the children born are females. They're little women, little bitty women, and they need protection
I'm one of them.
too. Yeah, all
Yes.
of us begin that way, right? Mm-hmm. Where is, Mr. Chairman, has Planned Parenthood put in a red card on this bill? Are they here?
We don't know at this point. There's numerous red cards, of course.
Is there a representative of Planned Parenthood here that would like to testify? Because I would really, really like to ask you some questions at the table.
Okay, yeah, we do have folks from Planned Parenthood.
Is it appropriate?
We do have 2 red cards. Yeah, if you want to do so.
Hi, Representative Johnson.
How are you?
Great, how are you?
I guess you need to identify yourself for the record.
Sure. I'm Reagan Carter, Senior Director of Public Affairs and Government Relations for Planned Parenthood.
Is that Planned Parenthood the national organization?
That is Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast that covers the state of Louisiana and the Houston, Texas area.
Could you tell us about your plans for the super center in New Orleans?
There is no plan for a super center in New Orleans. Planned Parenthood in Louisiana, Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast is building a new healthcare facility on South Claiborne.
How large is that facility going to be?
I am not the medical director, so I do not have the specifics of that facility, but I can talk with you about the healthcare services that Planned Parenthood has provided in Louisiana.
Well, I want to talk about the size of the clinic because you may not know the precise square footage. It is public record, but it's a large facility, correct? In relation to others around the country?
I have no idea the size of other facilities around the country.
You're the director of Planned Parenthood for the Gulf South. You don't know how large your facilities are?
I am not the director of Planned Parenthood for the Gulf South.
Okay.
I'm the Senior Director of Public Affairs and Government Relations.
Okay. What is the projected volume of abortions that would be provided at the New Orleans facility? Do you know that?
In Louisiana, we do not currently have an abortions license, so I guess the answer to that would be 0.
But Planned Parenthood has done some projections on how many abortions they would provide at the new facility in New Orleans if and when they're licensed to do so, correct?
I think someone has read that figure to be around 2,000, yes.
Around 2,000 abortions at this new facility in New Orleans if and when you're licensed to do so. Is that right?
If we are licensed to do so. I think that figure was based upon national calculations around need for services and not a projected model that I think you're getting at around a business model for profit. It was based upon need for services.
So, since you brought up profit, so is it your testimony today that Planned Parenthood will not profit off of the 2,000 projected abortions that it will do in the New Orleans facility?
It is my testimony today that I was under the impression that I was being called to the table to talk about family planning services, which is what someone asked a question about the data on family planning.
Yes, but this bill and a number of others today, I mean, this bill specifically is about funding for abortion. It directly involves the facility that's planned for New Orleans, so it's certainly relevant to the testimony today, isn't it?
This bill is actually about defunding Planned Parenthood out of Medicaid services. And someone also provided testimony already that the Hyde Amendment prevents any Medicaid funding for going to abortion services.
So, but again, back to that question, are you saying you're not willing to answer the question of whether or not Planned Parenthood will profit from the 2,000 projected abortions in New Orleans?
No, sir, that is not what I said. What
Okay.
I said is I'm not the appropriate person to respond to that question based upon my job at Planned Parenthood.
Well, I'm not asking you for a figure. I'm just asking for a yes or no. Are they going to profit or not?
I don't have that answer.
You're familiar with the video expose that made all national news, international news, several months ago concerning Planned Parenthood and their abortion provisions, is that right?
Yes, last summer.
And what was your reaction to that video? Do you defend what Planned Parenthood has done and said that's been taped and made national news on video? Do you disclaim it in some way? I mean, it's a serious question because
It's a very serious question, and I actually appreciate the question because I appreciate the opportunity to mention that video and those videos launched many investigations, and Planned Parenthood has been cleared of all wrongdoing in those investigations. The company has been deemed to be a fake company, and they have been indicted in Texas and are up on multiple federal investigations and counts for those videos.
and they'll be cleared of all those investigations. But let's not talk about the people who made the video. Let's talk about the people who are in the video and testifying that they were profiting off the sale of baby body parts. Isn't that right?
That is what the videos try to say. The reality of what the videos have, all of the information and investigations have talked about, is that those videos were talking about fetal tissue donation, which is legal in this country. Many research groups, many hospitals have participated in fetal tissue research. Fetal tissue research has been known to find treatments for cancer, other immunizations, and so those videos were about that. The videos were edited to demonstrate things that we were not talking about as an organization. The fees that were mentioned were fees for transportation of fetal tissue donation, and those fees are legal in this country. And after those videos, Planned Parenthood also made a decision to no longer accept reimbursement for transportation. Planned Parenthood, national organization, or across the state, has never profited from the sale of baby body parts.
Wait, okay. Say that last part again?
Planned Parenthood in this country has never profited from, in your words, baby body parts, has never profited from fetal tissue donation.
Well, I'm not talking about fetal tissue donation. I'm talking about baby body parts.
But the answer to the question is no. Planned Parenthood has never profited from that because Planned Parenthood does not do that.
So you're disclaiming all of the video
I
that
am.
was made public and that all of us watched play out on the national news. That was all made up and manufactured?
They were highly edited, and those guys have been indicted. With all due respect, Representative Johnson, I would really like to ask the questions that I thought you called me to the table.
These are
and that is
very
about
real.
Planned Parenthood services.
We ask the questions here. These are very relevant to us as lawmakers because we're talking about inviting your organization into our state. And I have serious concerns about your organization nationally and in the Gulf Coast region because of the very clear evidence to all of us of their past practices. I don't think that is something we need in Louisiana. And this bill is seeking to defund that organization for what I think is very valid reasons. Now, you can disclaim all the videos and say that they were over-edited, but I think everyone can make up their own minds. Have you seen all the videos that were released yourself? Have you watched those videos?
Yes.
You've seen every one of them?
Not every one of them, but I've watched some of them.
Well, I've seen them all, and it's very compelling and to me, very frightening that we might have that kind of thing going on in Louisiana. Well, we could do this all day. I don't mean to beat up on you,
No,
okay? I
it's
appreciate
okay.
you for coming in, but I don't personally regard Planned Parenthood to be a good corporate citizen based upon their practices. I don't think we need that in Louisiana, and that's one of the reasons I support this bill. But I'll yield to questions because I'm sure every light is lit. So,
May I respond to you, Representative Johnson?
please.
I am not trying to say that if those videos were true, that there should not be concern. What I'm saying that the videos were highly edited, that they have been deemed faked, the organizations have been indicted, and in the state of Louisiana, Planned Parenthood is a highly trusted, qualified healthcare provider. We have been passed, we've been audited, we have been found of no wrongdoings for Medicaid, and this bill is about defunding Planned Parenthood out of Medicaid. The Center for Medicare and Medicare Services sent a letter on yesterday talking about this exact type bills that are popping up in other parts of this country are unlawful. And so I wanted to be really clear what this bill is about. It is about defunding Planned Parenthood from Medicaid services. CMS also said that this has taken away choice for women to be able to go to the provider of their choice. And right now, we have about 9,000 Medicaid patients that have chosen to come to Planned Parenthood for the services that we provide. I think it was Representative Cox that also mentioned the rates of HIV and STDs in this state. And I think that removing any provider that is taking care of those needs for people in this state will only put Louisiana at a higher health care crisis than we are right now.
If you're doing all that wonderful work in Louisiana, why do you need a new abortion super center in New Orleans?
I think I responded to that. We're building a healthcare facility in New Orleans.
But to provide 2,000 projected abortions per year in our state.
We're building a healthcare center in New Orleans to be able to provide more services that we're currently providing, because right now there is a limited capacity for healthcare services for people in this state.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
And Representative Johnson, we're going to acknowledge you again if you can wrap it up.
I'll be very brief. No one here, if you listen to the testimony and the exchanges earlier, no one is saying that this bill would make abortion illegal in Louisiana. That's not what the legislation is. It's about defunding the procedure, because that's the right and the will of the people of the state. Through their elected representatives in a constitutional republic, that's how this works. If you don't like it, elect people who agree with you. But we're going to advance the public policy of the state. I have one more question for Planned Parenthood. How many facilities does Planned Parenthood operate in the state of Louisiana?
2.
And how many in Texas, do you know?
I don't. I'm sorry.
More than 2?
Yes.
Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast covers how many states?
Portions of Houston, Texas area, and Louisiana. So 2.
Just 2 states.
Mm-hmm.
So
and not the entire state of Texas.
okay. Has Planned Parenthood ever been investigated for Medicaid fraud in the state of Texas or Louisiana?
In both.
And how did that turn out?
In Louisiana, which is the only state that I can speak to, there were no findings.
I thought you said you were the director for public affairs and governmental relations for Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast, which covers Texas and Louisiana, right?
I'm the senior director of public affairs and government relations for Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast, but only in Louisiana.
Okay. Are you aware?
I have a counterpart in Texas.
Okay. Well, they're not here today, but are you aware, I'm sure you are, that in Texas they had to pay a $1.4 million settlement for Medicaid fraud, taxpayer-funded Medicaid dollars that were fraudulently obtained by Planned Parenthood in Texas. Is that right?
Correct. And Representative Johnson, may I add something to that?
Sure.
I am sure, since you are an attorney, that you are also aware that a settlement is not an admission of guilt.
And I'm sure that was made a part of the documentation. But are you aware that Karen Reynolds, who was the whistleblower in that case, claims that the fraudulent practices were present at all of Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast clinics, including the 2 facilities in Louisiana?
I can honestly say I was not aware that she said that, but I can also honestly say that we were audited in the state of Louisiana, and there were no findings.
Are you aware of how many matters of fraud Planned Parenthood has been investigated for around the country?
I am not.
I'll get you that information.
Thank you. Is there a such thing as closing arguments at this table?
No.
Thank you, Representative Johnson.
If you will read it in, please. Mr. Chairman and members, House Bill number 1081 is relative to the regulation of abortion, provides for defined terms, including dismemberment abortion, prohibits performance of dismemberment abortions, provides for penalties for violations, provides for legal proceedings pursuant to violations, provides for construction of certain provisions, and for related matters.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've been here a long time. We have more to do, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. By way of introducing the bill, I know all of you have seen it, probably heard about it. Here's the problem. Every year, more than 1,000 innocent unborn children in Louisiana are victims of this inhumane, barbaric practice that is known as dismemberment abortion. This method is known in the abortion practice as a D&E, which means dilation and evacuation. And without going into too much gory detail, it involves dilating a woman's cervix, vacuuming the amniotic fluid that surrounds the child, and then introducing an instrument which is used to grasp and pull the child out piece by piece. The thing that's so disturbing about this, when you look into it, is that the child is alive during this tortuous process, and the child dies of bleeding out during the dismemberment. To better understand its brutality, consider what one of our U.S. Supreme Court Justices, Anthony Kennedy, has said. In the 2007 case Gonzalez versus Carhart, this is an excerpt, he said, quote, "Friction causes the fetus to tear apart. For example, a leg might be ripped off the fetus as it is pulled through the cervix and out of the woman," unquote. In his dissent in the 2000 case Steinberg versus Carhart, he said, quote, "The fetus in many cases dies just as a human adult or child would. It bleeds to death as it is torn limb from limb," unquote. Scientific evidence shows that many of these babies can feel the most excruciating pain during this barbaric procedure. And according to the National Abortion Federation training textbook, dismemberment abortions are the preferred method, a preferred method anyway, in part not because they're necessary, but because they are cheaper than other available methods. So for expediency purposes, they're engaging in this practice. This bill is passed in other states, and I think it's time for Louisiana to step up to the plate and ban this barbaric procedure once and for all.
Representative Johnson, would you like to close?
I'll be very brief. A lot has been said here. I wish we had time to go into every little detail of it. Of course, we can disagree about language. Ms. Schilling and I have been on opposite ends on a couple of important matters of litigation and even debated recently at the LSU Law School on issues related to all this, and we're good at parsing language. We can do that. But let me tell you, read from their own journals again, reminding you, the National Abortion Federation training textbook says dismemberment abortion are not a preferred method, or they are a preferred method, in part not because they are necessary, but because they are cheaper. It's a matter of expediency, and if you look at some of the other journals, the Management of Unintended and Abnormal Pregnancy textbook, page 157, says this, quote, "The proportion of U.S. abortions performed in the second trimester has varied little since 1992. According to surveillance data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, roughly 12% of abortions occur at or after 13 weeks gestation. Only 3.8% of abortions occur at 16 to 20 weeks, and only 1.4% at or after 21 weeks. So the large majority of second trimester abortions do involve this procedure in the U.S., but here's an important thing for you to think about. In many other countries, like Canada, even Cuba, the United Kingdom, and most of Europe, this procedure is banned. You don't get an abortion by this procedure because they regard it to be barbaric, and they have other medical methods that comprise a larger proportion of second and later term abortion where it's allowed. The bill has passed in 3 previous states, Kansas, Oklahoma, West Virginia. As has been mentioned, it was challenged in court in Kansas and Oklahoma, but here's the important part, and I'm sure part of what Professor Getty would have addressed if she didn't have to run off and teach constitutional law. She was going to explain to you that Kansas and Oklahoma were challenged in state court under their state constitutions, not in federal court. Why is that important? I think we could survive a challenge in Louisiana state court under our Constitution, and I'm very confident that this would pass muster at the federal level, at the U.S. Supreme Court as well, given what sitting justices have said, including none less than Justice Ginsburg, who called this procedure, in her own words, brutal. This does not impose an undue burden on a woman's right to choose, either in its purpose or effect, and that's the legal test. This bill does not ban abortion in Louisiana. It is not a political agenda, as has been claimed by the letter read by some national abortion lawyer who's not here and has never met any of us individually. It's about the public policy of our state. And you and I are sent here, as Representative Bagley rightfully said, by our constituents to advance that cause, to advance the public policy of the state of Louisiana. The question is, I'll leave you with this, what do we want to stand for in this state? I don't think barbarism is what Louisianians are about. The child is alive during this torturous process. Remember those 8 words. The child is alive during this barbaric procedure. It feels the excruciating pain and it dies of bleeding out and being ripped apart. We don't stand for that in Louisiana. I hope you're unanimous with me in supporting this bill. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, sir. Representative Jackson.
Thank you. Professor Getty, as Representative Johnson has said, had to go to teach constitutional law, but she stated that she would be back at 12:30 and didn't make it. But she also requested that if she did not make it back, she was going to submit to this committee her written statement that she would have given if she had been here. And so I want to make sure we're able to make that a part of the record when it's submitted, since she didn't make it back.
Thank you. We
Thank
will
you.
do that. We, I did mention we didn't read cards in because of the large number. We also had 7 other cards in opposition not wishing to speak. We do have a motion by Representative Cox to report House Bill 1081 favorably. Is there any objection? With no objection, we'll report House Bill 1081 favorably. Thank you, Representative Johnson.